You're listening to the Multiverse Fancast, proud member of the Misfit Faction Media Network.
All right, then. On with the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the Multiverse Fancast. This is your host, Rob, singing to the sweet sounds of the sultry voice that is me. How are you all today? Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, if you are listening to us, you're probably listening to us on one of these stations like Podbeam, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or any other listening station. So we thank you very much for supporting us and listening to us and either downloading or subscribing. If you are in the mood, feel free to click that little subscribe so you can get updates from us whenever we post. You can also find us on social media. That's right, we're on the Facebook. You can find us as Misfit Faction Media Network and join us there. You can also listen and watch to Cinematic Adventures, the Multiverse Fancast, which is what you're listening to, and MF Uncensored. On the Instagram, you can catch us with Bibliophiles Assemble. That is producer Mel's little pet project that she's been working on. And then you can hear us and see what we're up to with the Misfit Faction. You can also follow us on the Twitter. That is the Misfit Faction is how you can find us there. Apparently, we're on the TikTok, although I have yet to see this, but Paul and Ronnie assure me of it. So I'm just going to go with that's what the kids are doing nowadays, the TikTok. And also, of course, we're on YouTube. You can also check us out on our website on themisfitfaction.com where you can see past podcasts. You can see all of our updates. You can read articles. Like, for example, I've been posting all of my reviews of She-Hulk. We're on the 6th episode right now, and that has just gone up. So I hope that you can read my stuff. And there's also merchandise. That's right. You can buy the Misfit Faction stickers, shirts, sweatshirts, all sorts of cool garb and swag. We invite you to do that. And on my right here, joining me now, oh, here he comes. He's walking into the studio. Hello there, Paul. Paul, how are you today?
I am doing well, Rob. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. And I am pleased beyond all punch to have invited with us the local legend, the expert on the Sandman and all things magic, Brendan, also known as BlindBat8719. Brendan, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Rob. Thanks, guys, for having me back on again.
Oh, we're excited to have you on. So Ronnie couldn't be with us this week, but I do have his thoughts on this, so please remind me if I do forget.
Oh, do you really?
Yes, I actually do.
Wow.
I texted him this morning and asked him, and he sent me some stuff.
Interesting.
And Brendan mentioned to me via text a couple weeks ago, he says, when you guys do Sandman, please invite me on the show. I'm a big kind of Sandman nerd, and I'm really into this. So I'm glad to see that we have a fellow resident expert. Well, no, I shouldn't put myself in the same company as the Blind Bat himself, because I've, as someone who has read the Sandman comics, I am in no way an expert. How about you, Brendan? What is your level of expertise on this?
I mean, I think reading the whole stuff, buying an extra book about explaining everything, and buying, I think, the 2 follow-up or 3 follow-up comics,
right,
as well as the Overture. I think I'm just about as good as anybody else about understanding what's going on in the Sandman universe and what Neil Gaiman has put together over those 75 issue run or something like between, I think it was 89 to 93, I think is what it is. So that's me trying to show off a little bit.
Wow,
maybe know a thing or two.
Nice subtle flex. Love that. So yeah, we are the 3 that are going to be, and we're going to do something a little different this week. I invited Brendan to co-host with me, so he's going to help lead the discussion a little bit here. So when he comes up with ideas, he's going to jump in, and I'm going to be picking up stuff on the fly too. But first, before that, we have a little bit of news. So this is the first program that we've recorded since D23, and so we don't want to go too long because at this point you've probably heard all the things. But let's talk a little bit about a couple of the big things that came out. So let's go chronological. Paul, what can you tell us a little bit about Werewolf by Night?
It's a movie.
It is not a movie.
It's a limited television event.
Yes, it is. And they just released the running time on it, too.
They also just released the trailer. The trailer is a classic black and white, vintage, horror movie type.
Like 30s kind of feel to it.
It looks really good. Like, I remember Sean and I talked about it on Cinematic Adventures, and I remember showing him the trailer before we recorded, and he's like, oh my God, this is so my wheelhouse.
Yes. I imagine for him. Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Old school movie monster type episode. Really, it looks interesting and it looks different, which is, I think, something that Marvel is in need of.
Yeah. Now I'm hoping, well, I'm really hoping it wasn't the trailer that was black and white. Like the actual show is going to be in black and white.
The whole show is, yeah. I mean, it would make more sense. I mean, because we've been fooled by trailers before. Marvel's also famous for putting fake footage in their trailers, which, you know, we've caught more than once, and we're like, oh.
Now, am I wrong to think that this show looks actually a little gory?
I think they're using the black and white to help be a little bit more graphic, because you're not showing like the bright red blood or anything along those lines. So black and white can kind of get away with, and also a lot of silhouette work, a lot of shadow work. You see the transformation, you see like the werewolf like turning. It looks like it might be a little horror themed.
So, fun fact, Quentin Tarantino, when he was putting out his first Kill Bill, the NCAA said it was like way too gory and bloody. So he took the fight against the 88s and did it in black and white to sort of tone it down. And so, yeah, you're right. You can kind of get away a little bit with that.
And Rob just stole a little bit of trivia that I was just about to interject into the conversation.
Well, Brendan, I'm glad to know that great minds think alike. You're definitely on board with this. You've tuned into the right podcast.
Why do you keep trying to get so sultry?
Because this is my sultry evening voice. If you're listening to us after 11.
He does have a nice podcast radio voice. I remember hearing him a couple episodes ago. I'm like, oh man, he should do radio.
I used to do the morning announcements at the high school, and I did it for like 3 years and everything. So I got to hone my chops on that a little bit.
The talent there.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But some other things from D23. The full Thunderbolts cast has been announced.
Yeah.
There's a couple of surprises on there. A couple of people that we wanted on there that were not.
I did not expect David Harbour to be a part of this.
I didn't expect David Harbour, especially because Yelena's like looking like the leader almost of it. I was not expecting Taskmaster. It's basically like it's almost like Black Widow 2.
Yeah, it actually felt like all of the secondary kind of lame villains that maybe they'll make better.
Yeah, I John Walker.
He's not lame. He's just ire-inducing.
Yeah. I want to see what they do with him, though, if they've changed anything. Because a lot of these characters we only saw in one medium. I think the whole lineup was Bucky, who has the most screen time out of all of them. Yeah. Yelena, who's become a fan favorite. We had John Walker, Ghost.
Right, which I could tell you very little about her.
Yeah. Taskmaster, and I think that was it.
Well, and what's her name? Julia Louis-Dreyfus's
character.
Yeah.
But like the big ones that people were hoping to hear were names like Punisher, Ghost Rider. Right. Now they're saying that Punisher is rumored for the Daredevil reboot.
Yeah, there's a rumor that he's going to be stepping in where Jessica Jones was going to step in.
Right.
So
that's only the rumor mill, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think it's cool that they get, like you said, the B list of villains. Like that's a great way of reusing these villains that didn't die and let us maybe delve a little bit into them a little bit more.
Right, and give them their moment to shine a little bit, and give them some real material to grapple with, so we can really see what they're capable of.
And speaking of villains making a return, we also got confirmation that Tim Blake Nelson was going to be reprising his role as Dr. Samuel Stearns from The Incredible Hulk. Now, this is the second character from The Incredible Hulk that's been brought back into the spotlight a little bit. First it was Emil Blonsky as Abomination, and now Samuel Stearns is the leader, because that was something that they really teed up in The Incredible Hulk, and then just
never went anything with it, and that was almost 15 years ago.
I was a totally different person.
So there's actually possibilities too that Tim Blake Nelson might be in She-Hulk.
I can see it.
Because there's how caught up are you on She-Hulk?
Completely.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Okay, Brendan, have you been watching? Oh, good. We all are. We'll get into it another time when we do our She-Hulk episode. But as you saw, like with the Wrecking Crew when they were in there, there's a possibility that their leader might actually be the leader. Right. So we might see him sooner rather than later. And
one last piece of news, not from D23, but just to tie into what we're talking about now and next. Constantine 2 confirmed with Keanu Reeves.
Holy hell.
Like,
who saw that coming?
I know he's been lobbying for it.
Yeah.
He's been the one pushing it, and it has a cult following. There are zero details out besides the fact that it will be a sequel to the first one, and Keanu Reeves is expected to reprise.
And Francis Lawrence is expected to direct, and Akiva Goldman is suspected to be writing. And those are all our originals.
So I hope they learned a little bit from the first one. I don't not like the first one.
I just rewatched it last night.
It's better than I thought it was.
Yeah, I still like it a lot. It's not a great movie, but it's still a very enjoyable movie.
Yeah, we'll talk about that during our actual Constantine episode, which is hopefully coming out next.
Nice.
But I think that's all the news I got.
Yes, there was a minor thing, like just to let you know, they're all still working on Fantastic Four, so they've confirmed the director, and now they've confirmed the writers, but we still have no confirmation of stars at all whatsoever. There were a bunch of trailers that were shown at D23, but we, the public, didn't get to see them. Like there was a Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur one. Yeah. I think they probably showed Guardians 3 again.
They showed something from the Kang or from Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh, right.
Where he's talking to Kang.
Oh, I know. Oh, we also got and we, the public, got this too, a Secret Invasion trailer.
Yeah, which I'm kind of about.
See, there have been a lot of their shows. I have to say this: when I'm excited about the show, it always lets me down. When I'm not excited about the show, it always surprises me at being way better than it is. So, like, I feel that way about Secret Invasion. Then I'm like, okay,
that's how people feel about our podcast too.
All right, yeah. We surprise them.
Oh, always with mild quality.
All right, and that I would say wraps up our news pretty well.
Okay.
All right, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to hash out the goodness that is the Sandman. But first, a quick break.
Hey guys, it's Paul, and the Misfit Faction is looking for your help. We are trying to grow not only our network, but also grow our brands, and the best way to do that is if you guys are looking to start your very own podcast. Maybe you guys have been listening to us for a while. Maybe it's something you guys have always wanted to do, but you're not sure how to get started. If you go to podbean.com/misfitfaction, you guys will get a month of free podcasting on us. That is a gift from us. So make sure if you guys are looking to start your own show, you reach out to us and go to podbean.com/misfitfaction. Also, maybe you guys have your own online business or service that you're always looking to grow, and advertising is a very big part of that. If you guys go to sponsorship.podbean.com/misfitfaction, you guys can get $100 worth of free advertising, again, as a thank you from us to you guys. That's sponsorship.podbean.com/misfitfaction.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sticking through the commercial break. We're glad you came back. So we are talking Sandman. So Sandman came out back in end of July, beginning of August. I couldn't even tell you.
The show, yeah.
So one of the things about, and this, I guess this is where we'll start off with, one of the things about Sandman is that they found Netflix, when they were checking like diagnostics of viewers and everything, they found that not a lot of people were binging it, and they couldn't figure out why until they finally realized that this is not a bingeable show.
No,
this is something.
Not.
So all right. So both of you are kind of answering my question there. So how did you watch it? Like 1 or 2 episodes at a time? And
we did 1 or 2 episodes at a time. I think the most we did was 3.
Yeah.
But like even that, like it depends on how long they are. In all honesty, because like the very first episode is almost an hour.
Okay.
Then it jumps. Then like typical Netflix shows, the next one's like 37 minutes, and like that's much more easily digestible.
Brandon.
I think I did it more like once a day because of, again, newborn in the house, and it was just easier. And then I had my wife to watch, I think, a few episodes with me.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I got her up to maybe 6 even, actually, now that I think about it. But she had, I think in one of the scenes where we're following death and the baby dies, that was a little too much for her.
Yeah.
So she kind of clocked out for the rest of the season for the most part.
Yeah, I get that. So, yeah, I know for us, we were only watching maybe like 2 episodes a day because it's just so dense.
Yes.
Like it is like this is a show that where you have to actively watch it. You can't just let it wash over you. You have to like really engage, and then once it's over, you have to think about it and process it. Like it's not something that you can just like, this is not Kissing Booth 3 where you could just like let it go.
Or even Cobra Kai. Like I was able to binge watch Cobra Kai in like 2 days.
I haven't caught up. I'm still in season 4.
But
But I also feel like with what you're saying with those examples, though, like those are very much like bubblegum. They're bright and cheery.
Right.
This gets to be really heavy at times, and really dark. Like they're a little bit. I think it's episode 5, which is 24/7. The comic that's based off has been said to be the darkest comic ever printed, at least on the Western world, at least. So you watch something like that, are you really going to be jumping off to the next episode, not knowing that actually it's one of the better episodes that, coming up in number 6, a little bright and cheery. But yeah, some of this stuff is really heavy and hard, and it's again, even with reading the comic books, the first volume, which is I think the first half, volumes episodes 1 through 6 kind of take care of the first book for the most part.
Yeah.
A little
they
bit
kind of go an
slow
episode comic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slow go, and it's building up the world really. So once you kind of get through that part of you have to understand the world, and it does start a little bit of a weird spot where
Yeah.
it starts in 1930s, I believe, and it's the capture of Neil Gaiman, sorry, of the
Morpheus.
Sandman.
Not Neil
And-
Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman's
Yeah, no,
been
not Neil
captured.
Gaiman. No, it's the capture of the Sandman,
Right.
and then the main character just sits there for the whole episode essentially.
Yeah,
you
so-
don't know nothing special, and you have all these characters who really are only there for a cameo. Really, I mean, Charles Dance, who was always great to see now
Yeah.
after seeing him in Game of Thrones.
Oh, see, I'm
But he
a
basically just
Charles
makes a
Dance
cameo.
Last Action Hero fan.
Oh, I know, I like the Last Action Hero. I just
I
didn't
like
know he
the
was the
Last
bad
Action
guy in that.
Oh yeah. So I think the three of us are coming from three very unique standpoints. Because Paul, what's your history with the comics?
I knew of them. It is of the DC nature,
Right.
So obviously I'm fairly well versed in my DC lore, and also like this is the god pantheon type stuff of DC Comics, which DC never really shied away from.
Right.
Lucifer Morningstar is still an active character,
Yeah.
and obviously the show came out, Lucifer, and it is very loosely based.
Very.
Like mostly in name.
Yeah.
But like, it was nice to see Mazikeen and Lucifer and all that stuff in the more original. But like for me, I was always more of a like towards the Constantine side of the magic
Right.
stuff, like your Swamp Thing, stuff like that. So for me, I never read the comics, Sandman. I knew of them and I know enough that I can have a conversation, obviously. But for me, it's a heavy comic. It's not light reading either, just like it's not light viewing. So that helped me kind of go into this very fresh.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
I know for me, like of course I know for me. I've read, I think, the first like 60 or so issues. Like there's still like a couple of like the 11 and 12 volumes that I haven't read, and then some of the post stuff I've read. Like there was like some Song of stuff and everything, but I'm no way a completist for Gaiman's Sandman. And now Brendan, it seems like he's raising his hand. If you can't see him at home, he is raising his hand saying he is an absolute completist. You've done everything.
Yes, I think the whole 75 comic run, though I collected the graphic novels of those. They did a thing called Dream Hunters. I read that.
I read some of
everything
that, yeah.
that was post. The two Def books that came after, the Overture that came out more recently, I think 2015, I think that came out. I actually bought a whole separate book on it, and I'm debating about buying the quotable thing. So yes, I'm more of a completionist when it comes to Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and having really enjoyed the stuff, and really hoping that the stuff keeps going on Netflix, because there's a lot of seeds that were set in this season that will pay off in whatever season 2, season 3 that comes out.
So yeah, and I think Brendan and I can both absolutely attest to the fact that this is probably one of the most brilliant comic book runs that's ever been made.
Yes.
It's thoughtful, it's deep, the artwork is just astounding. I've read a couple of other Gaiman stuff, but nothing comes close to the way this does. This is just like his masterpiece. And I think
what I like about it too is that he pulls from like every little thing, and he incorporates it's one of the reasons also why I like Tangent, the Gargoyles TV show when it came out. But like with Gaiman, but like he pulls in Shakespeare, he pulls in different mythologies, he brings in Christianity, the lore behind some of that stuff, and like everything kind of fits in, and even a little bit of the DC stuff as well, because I think that there's a House of Mystery, or like the House of Mystery, the House of M, that is somewhat a DC thing, as well as Gaiman kind of took that and put that into the Dreaming as well.
Yeah. Gaiman is really well known for his world building. He creates these rules, these characters, and just lets them fly. And like I've watched Good Omens, which was a good adaptation. I've seen. What is it? American Gods. I watched like 1 or 2 seasons of that, and then I kind of lost interest. So, like, part of the problem that's always been with Gaiman's work is that so often much of it is unfilmable. And this and I think probably, we're all surprised that they managed to turn this into something, because it's so like nebulous. In fact, I think that's why I didn't go further with reading the comics, because it's so hard to grasp at some points, because it's so like philosophically vague and just kind of like floaty. It floats through scenes, and you don't really know what's going on at times.
There is a little bit of that at times. Again, the idea that dream work quality. Like I was rereading The Dollhouse, and like, you actually literally have to turn the book sideways just to kind of follow the panels as one thing. And there was definitely one of the side stories I remember in Endless Nights where it's the despair story, and it's just. And I think along with the lead, it's just either too dark or things are just so all over the place and discombobulated at times where you're like, I definitely with the despair story, I did not get a good feeling. I skipped that one like every time. I'm like, I don't feel good after reading this thing. And
despair made you not feel good?
Yeah, there's so many.
It did not make me feel good.
There's so many of the stories I can remember reading them going, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to keep turning the pages. Because it is really tough to wrap your head around. And I think you get a sense from that a little bit from the show, too, that there are some times where you're like, I don't fully grasp it, but I get a sense of what's going on. Like, I will say that the show is probably drawing from the majority of the more chronological stories, like Doll's House and stuff like that. Things that are more narrative-driven instead of just like... that kind of are too nebulous. So this has been a show that has been a long time coming because this was something that was, of course, made in the 90s, and it's been in development hell forever.
At one point, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was attached to it.
Yeah. Let's see. Roger Avery was attached to it to direct it after the success of Pulp Fiction. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio in '96 with Preludes and Nocturne storyline. Let's see. John Peters, best known for Batman and Superman Lives, he was attached to it. William Farmer was attached to it. Like number of people, throughout the years. And then finally in 2007, Neil Gaiman said, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I still have my fingers kind of crossed for it. He says we need someone who has the same obsession with the source material as Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings, and Terry Gilliam was attached. He wanted Terry Gilliam to be attached at one point, but and then I think Seth Rogen was and Evan Goldberg were connected.
Probably because I know they did Preacher,
right.
and they did The Boys.
Yes,
they're part of that. People forget that Seth Rogen's
he's
executive producer,
prolific producer. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he loves doing stuff like that.
Joseph Gordon eventually dropped out. So
creative differences, they said.
Yeah, I think I was shocked when I started to. You know what? This is what it was. I started to read stories that this was coming to Netflix, and I'm like, you know what? I'll believe it when I actually see a trailer.
I kind of figured they would drop it on HBO Max.
Yeah,
it's a DC
That's
Warner
true.
Brothers property.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know why the logistics worked out the way they did with that, but I know as a consequence they did omit, especially in the first part, any references to the DC universe, because I do know he goes to see John Constantine first of all, as opposed to Joanna Constantine.
I don't want.
Martian Manhunter
We'll talk
makes
about
an
that
appearance in the comics as well. They mentioned there's a couple other DC references, like did you go to visit? I think Mr. Miracle is mentioned in the story originally. But I think they make it its own separate thing and not worry about where does this fit in the continuity. And really, the DC superhero stuff was tangential to what he's trying to tell Gaiman is that they just will cut all that stuff out. And I guess Joanna Constantine, which they made for the comics originally, was original because they.
I have an argument that's going to defend her.
Okay.
All right, but actually, and I'm sure Brendan can attest to this, that Batman actually makes an appearance in the comics. There is a panel or two with Batman. We have to remember this is DC Vertigo, which is a wheelhouse of DC. And I think Swamp Thing is in Vertigo.
Swamp Thing's in Vertigo.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Dark Justice kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. So all right, I want to try this. Paul, tell us, what is the Netflix Sandman show about? Run us through a quick synopsis here.
It starts off in, I think, 1916 is when the show technically kicks off. So
around there,
in 1916, a group of occult worshippers are trying to capture what they think is a personification of death.
Yes.
To help bring back loved ones that they've lost. Okay. In doing so, they accidentally summon Dream, or Morpheus, as he is actually named. And when Morpheus refuses to bow to their wishes, they imprison him for over 100 years. And the story is him escaping and then reclaiming his kingdom.
Okay, that's the first 2 episodes.
Okay.
Keep going.
And other stuff.
And I'm not surprised because I will tell you that I had to watch a recap video coming over here. Then I'm like, oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. Because there's so much that goes on in this series. And it's
well, if I may help with a little bit with it, you're saying with the recap thing.
Yeah.
The first 5 episodes, just if you want to recap it, it really is a hero's quest.
Mm-hmm.
That's the short and long of that one.
Very good, Joseph Campbell.
You're welcome. And then the second half, it's more of you see kind of what does Dream do as a function, and a little bit introduces the games at the family that are known as the Endless, especially Desire and Dream, or at least Desire plays on Dream. That's kind of what that is, and you kind of see what that's about, and then the weird stuff that Gaiman will do. See,
I like this side of DC. I think it's one of the things that DC does a little bit better than Marvel is how they tackle the they have huge characters in DC that are literal like actual deities. You have not just in this, but you also have a character like the Spectre, or you have the Presence, who's basically God in the DC universe. Marvel does great work with the supernatural side. You have your Ghost Riders, you have your Doctor Stranges, but I always felt that DC just did it a little bit better, and they weren't afraid to go as dark.
No.
Like, Marvel can't do a show like this. DC can. And DC has plenty of other characters that they can do also.
I think one of the strengths to DC right now is the fact that a DC film or television show doesn't have to tie into a continuity.
And it doesn't have to look like a continuity.
Yeah, like Marvel, everyone, as soon as something Marvel comes out, everyone's like, well, what does that have to do with this character? And how does that tie into him and her? And DC doesn't have to, like, no one questioned, when Joaquin's Joker came out, no one was like, well, wait a minute, does he know that character? And everyone was like, okay, no, it's a DC story, and that's okay. And DC has failed in its continuity idea of creating a shared universe, but I think they can find strength from that by creating properties like this with Sandman, where it doesn't have to tie in.
Agreed. I think what we talked about a little bit last time, Paul, when we talked about Batman Beyond, like, you have your own little universe. Here's the Batman Beyond storyline, and there's this way you can explore all these different stories that you have with these characters. And it's okay to have 5 different Batman, because each one you can keep track of which one's on which storyline.
Right.
Yeah. So heading it up is the character of Dream, or Morpheus, played by Tom Sturridge. Tom Sturridge is not an actor with whom I was previously familiar at all. And I think that was a strength for the show, that it was someone that we really didn't see doing anything else. Looking at his credits, it's like, he was in Velvet Buzzsaw with Jake Gyllenhaal, and he was in The Hollow Crown. So it sounds like he might be more of a stage actor than anything. But not a lot of stuff for him. So what do we think about? And so I'll start with Brendan. As someone who's read the comics and has always had sort of probably a vision as to what Morpheus should look like, how does Tom Sturridge play up to your expectations?
I think he was amazing. I think he did a wonderful job. Again, I was wondering about the black eye thing, because in the comic books, Morpheus has these starry black eyes, and they do make a hint of it. They do like a little Easter egg of it in, I think, one of the episodes. But they said they tried to make him do it with context, and it didn't look good. So.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I watched a video this morning where they did talk about how they tried to get that done. They tried all sorts of contact lenses. They tried all sorts of effects, and it withdrew from the performance of his face.
Which is a
that
big
makes sense.
Thing, because I felt like he was able to portray all these minute emotions on Morpheus's face, where he's stone cold killerish and like really scary, to like this concern. You start seeing him have this revelation, like, oh wow, I probably hurt that person's feelings. I should maybe find my own way of apologizing, and all these little changes in his face.
Yeah, one of the things about him is that, not Tom Sturridge, but Dream, is that he's someone who everyone is always afraid of, but you never actually see him do anything that is like vengeful. He's always sort of just like, oh, well, I'm never going to let you do that again. Like, you expect him to like just hack and burn away at people, and he doesn't. Like, he's such an emo revenge kind of guy.
I disagree with that.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what do you think about 10,000 Nails, Damnation, and Hell to an ex-jilted lover?
Okay, Paul is second.
That's harsh.
That's
and
what
the
I thought
idea of constantly waking from a nightmare, like, you don't actually wake up, but every time you wake up, you're just in a different nightmare.
Okay, yeah. I guess his vengeance is more ironic than like, I'm going to physically attack you.
One more to that. Episode 11. You want dreams? You want ideas?
Provoked.
You're cutting
poked
blood
the
out
bear.
of your skin to write ideas on the wall.
Okay.
So it's not as not as fiery or bombastic, but does pretty good revenge ideas.
Good point.
And that's the thing about a lot of these deity characters. They go one of two ways. It's either explosive, wrathful vengeance or something just like eternal torment.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think Dream has always been more of the eternal like he gets to a point in this show at least where he's even with John D, Dr. Destiny as he's known in the comics, he doesn't punish him.
Right.
He's like, I'm just gonna let you sleep.
Right.
He could have, like, that guy stole his stuff and that guy was doing terrible things.
Yeah. I guess for Dream, he is more concerned with justice and putting things right than with punishment.
I can see that.
Yeah. I guess that's the way I view him. Brendan is smirking at me.
No, I'm just trying to think. I haven't thought of it like that because again, the John D thing, you got a good point. He did all these terrible things, but he also kind of gave Dream back all his power. So he's like, you weren't supposed to have the power in the first place. So I really can't fault you for not knowing how to use it. But again, I think it shows a little bit that Dream, that idea maybe of he has his own morality scale, or I forget the technical term for it, but his own ethics about things that, that's how he judges it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and back to the character, the actor playing him too, Tom Sturridge. Like, again, I knew very little about him, but was there anyone in this show really other than like Charles Dance that I was like, oh, it's that guy? Like there was a lot of unknown people who.
Matthew,
but that's
the crow,
right? That's a
Pat
voice
Oswalt.
That doesn't count.
Well, no, for me it does because that actually took me out at times.
Oh, it did.
I like Patton Oswalt. Like, oh, it's cool, he's doing it. But I hear it, and I'm like, that's Patton Oswalt.
Yeah.
Whereas Charles Dance or Lucifer, I didn't think.
Right, Gwendolyn Christie.
Kind of like, oh, this is Brianna Tarth. Oh, this is one of the Lancasters. It's just, I'm like, okay, they're in this movie, or the show. But it didn't take me out of it.
Yeah, at least with Gwendolyn Christie, she doesn't look too much like was it Brianna of Tarth?
Brianna of Tarth.
It didn't look too much like her because remember she's more of a warrior knight in Game of Thrones, whereas here she's like this. Well, she's the light bearer, so she's beautiful. So all right, so let's look at some of our main ones since we're on it. Let's talk about this Lucifer. They gender swapped her. And they went with Gwendolyn Christie. Did that play as a strength or a weakness, do you think?
I mean, she's barely in it. It's
but
hard.
She's such a main character. Is there any character? All right. Is there any character other than the Corinthian and Dream that are really like in it much more than her? Yeah.
But for me, and I'll do the hot take. I'm not a big fan of gender swaps or race swaps or anything along those lines. If you're getting the best actor or actress to perform, I can maybe get behind it. But I think they were trying to go so far from Tom Ellis and go because in the source material, like Lucifer looks like David Bowie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that's who they
inspiration.
That's who they based him off of, and. Like they still refer, it's very strange when they do so. They did it in the Constantine movie too with Gabriel, where the idea was because in most depictions these angels are depicted more feminine and just that's how they look, and they refer to Lucifer as a he, which is I don't know. It's just very like pick a lane for me.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, do it. If you're not, then don't go halfway with it.
Okay.
I have no problem with Gwendolyn Christie. I think she's a fantastic actress, and I like seeing her in things. Yeah. I think, especially after they kind of disserviced her in
Star Wars.
In Star Wars,
yeah, they really did.
Where they set her up to be such a big bad.
Yeah.
And then she goes out like a punk. But for me, I just thought it was very strange for the character of Lucifer, and I think it really was because Tom Ellis was very popular as Lucifer, but he was not the DC Lucifer. No. He was not based. He was based on the source material, but he was like they make fun of it in the show.
Yeah,
where they actually, I think they do an episode where there's like a Lucifer cult, and they're all like, "He's blonde," and he's like, "Why does everybody keep saying that?" But I think for the scenes that Lucifer was in, they were fine. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just don't get the casting choice. In all honesty,
but but you did like her as Lucifer.
I didn't have a problem with it, but I wasn't. But I wasn't like
you
a
weren't
fan
endeared.
of it,
okay.
if that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
Brendan, how about you?
I don't really bother me really. What happened was I think when they were in production, Neil Gaiman had tweeted out saying that with this version of Sandman, we are going to cast it as if we were writing the story today with how we want to represent things a bit. And because that was coming from the creator of the comic book series, any changes they kind of made to this, I was kind of more on board with them about some of that stuff. Because when you think some of this, just like ultimately, I'm like, doesn't really matter, especially I think because I know there was a big issues about or not issues, but people complain that they race swap Death because in the comic book she's a goth girl essentially, and in this one she's black. And in this regard, like when you think about it, it's a personification of Death. Does it really matter what her race actually is? And somebody's going, well, nobody else was. They changed. I'm like, well, we haven't met the whole family. We've only met 4 out of the 7 members. Maybe they did some other stuff. And there was also a scene where they showed too that when Sandman walks by and sees his ex-lover who is African, you see Sandman through her eyes. That was a tough sentence to say. And she sees him as a black man. So again, the idea of at least the endless, who are just personifications of things that humans go through, they can be malleable to look like anything. So really, it doesn't, to me, really matter what you pick for gender or for race. Now, going back to have Gwendolyn be Lucifer, sure, they say it looked a little closer to the comic book character. Didn't bother me. What bothered me more, honestly, was that she was the one involved in the duel for the helm than the actual demon. Because again, I liked that. That worked better for me in the comic books. But I guess you spend all this money on the actress, you want to get her in more of the scenes.
Yeah. Was that the one where they played essentially like a fight deck with one another?
Yes, where they say, I am
this, and
I'm a snake, and I'm an ox, and I'm a whatever thing, which in the books was like, this is a fun game. I want to play this with other people. It sounds like a fun thing to try.
All right, so I think if we were to go through all of the actors and actresses, we would be here forever. So, who stood out most for you in terms of a character? Paul.
I hated Joanna Constantine.
Okay, but so you're saying she stood out for you, but in that negative way. Okay.
I get what they did with her, and also I like how they did pronounce it Constantine, because that's supposedly how it really is, but everybody just kind of has changed it to Constantine. But again, something they make fun of in when Lucifer and him have their interaction, they make fun of the Constantine thing. But I liked, the character was just a gender swap of John Constantine, which again I just don't get. John Constantine's a very popular character; he's got a very big following. So it was just a weird choice, especially with Matt Ryan being so popular.
So let's take a side tangent on this. Let's talk about that swap a little bit.
There was really no point to it, and especially a character that has such an iconic look. Like John Constantine's trench coat and red tie is that was something that the Keanu Reeves movies got grief for, that he did not look like John Constantine.
No, he didn't have the accent, the scruff, the blonde hair, the red tie, or the brown trench coat. None of those things.
I've seen fan renderings of him in the trench coat, and that it makes it look awesome. It looks way better. There's just something about when you have a character that has an iconic look. It's like if Superman came out and instead of wearing a blue costume, he's got a purple one.
Right.
It's just why. So for me, while they did justice to the character, she was still very much in keeping with a John Constantine type. I just thought it was weird, and it just did not sit well with me.
I can defend it, but I want to hear what Brendan thought of it first.
Well, I would agree that I would have liked to have seen John Constantine. It would have been awesome to have Matt Ryan back again. I do think they made the change, though, for logistics in terms of who can use what character and try to, again, not have so much of a DC tie-in, eliminate any references really to DC and just stick with characters that were created during Neil Gaiman's run on Sandman.
So it's funny you say that, because DC has only been notorious about keeping ties on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman.
Okay.
For the most, because DC's owned by Warner Brothers. It's not like Marvel where they licensed out so much of their material that they couldn't say mutants until a year ago. So DC never really had that restriction. It was only based on their own company going, we need you to stay away from Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. That's it. Even in Smallville, they were very strict.
I did hear, though, that Brendan, what you're saying, and I did hear this, I was looking into it this morning, there were some rights issues with getting John Constantine.
Really?
Yeah, that there was all right, and now this is my defense of it. If you put in a male John Constantine in there, a certain amount of baggage comes with it. He is a character that has really broke through in the past few years. He's someone that we associate, like we can all picture him. Even if we don't see Matt Ryan with it, we can all picture him. I don't know if I picture Keanu Reeves, although I love that movie and I love his portrayal of it. It's something separate. But I think that the show wanted to distance itself as much as possible from being a part of the DC universe, that they said, let's try and strike any and all references to DC characters so that way it doesn't bring in sort of that tangential like baggage that comes with being John Constantine.
Which I can get, but then why have a Constantine in it? Why have Lucifer in it? I mean, because you can argue the same thing for Lucifer.
Wow.
No, Lucifer. This predates Lucifer, so I think this Lucifer comes first, and grabbing Tom Ellis, who did his own thing, and Neil Gaiman commented on that, saying that Tom Ellis went so far away, his version of it went so far away, they weren't going to try to reconcile with what they have now. They were going to start fresh. Now, also too, going back with Joanna Constantine as opposed to John Constantine. It's a cameo. In the grand scheme, you don't see John Constantine at all, if I remember correctly, in the rest of the books, except for this one bit in the beginning. Right. That's all it's for. Same thing with Martian Manhunter. Same thing with Mr. Miracle. They get mentioned for a little bit, and then they're gone. So to jump all those hoops for just really whatever screen time we saw makes it a lot easier. And I think also by having the two female Constantines, it made it easier to kind of quickly summarize, oh, this is an ancestor because they look the same. It makes it easier for them to tell that part of the story a lot faster.
See, and also when I think of Lucifer, I don't think of DC Comics. I think of, Christianity. And so I don't really see Lucifer as a character. Like, if I have to be really honest, when I think Lucifer, I think Paradise Lost.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, for me to then see Lucifer and be like, no, that's not Tom Ellis, that thought never occurs to me. So to have Joanna Constantine in there kind of, it's a brand new character for me, and it doesn't tie in because Constantine has he's been in Legends of Tomorrow. He's had animated movies and everything. I that's the Constantine I see. So to see Joanna Constantine kind of like doesn't connect me to that universe, and so it's not the same way that hearing Patton Oswalt was a distraction for Brendan. I think hearing the name John Constantine would have been a distraction for me.
Unfortunately, it was something that I was looking forward to.
I can understand that disappointment.
Because Constantine's one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. Like, I have an autograph from Matt Ryan.
Right. Pictures of you and him. And...
Yeah. So, like, for me, I am such a big John Constantine fan, so that when they were like, oh, we're going to not do John Constantine and we're going to do this, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But why?
I feel you on that.
Yeah. But, like, the same thing would have been for any, like, major... Again, I don't want to be... like hypocritical too, because I'll watch The Boys where they make a lot of changes to characters, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it's just, I think it's just
Homefront or whatever,
Stormfront. Yeah, I think for me it's just
Hero Gasm and everything, which was different than what it was in the comics. Which is it was still awesome, but yeah.
But for me, Constantine's just one of those characters that I just love so much that I just was like, well,
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It is what it is.
So now that we're out of that loop, let's get back to our favorite characters here. I will kick off. I have to say two of my favorite characters. So I loved Death. And I think the Death, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, the Death episode might have been one of my favorite episodes where she was going around, because it was so sweet and wonderful and insightful and brought, all the feels and everything for me. So I loved seeing Death. I also loved seeing Hal Carter, which is John Cameron Mitchell's character, who is in the comics, but he doesn't really get to sing because songs don't really translate well in comics.
No.
But to see John Cameron Mitchell doing this, I'm a fan of his. I think he's just a brilliant theater actor, and to see him really belt it out was just such a great scene for me. Great couple of scenes.
That's the who owns the house and does the drag singing, right?
Yep, he is.
Yeah, no, because you saw me wince because I'm thinking back to when he pulls the face off. I'm like, that was a little gruesome.
He is known for his biggest masterpiece was Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and to see him from that is just like so cool. So, Brendan, favorite character?
Oh, that's
or even portrayal.
I do think Morpheus is the best one, probably, because we spent the most time with him. But outside of that, being able to see Hob Gadling Like just that whole bit, because that was another thing that they changed because of the story. Because in the comics, wherever time they meet was the same. So 1589 or something like that. But in the comics, because it's set in 89, he meets him in 1989. He doesn't actually miss the appointment. Whereas because they decided to update it and make this show 100 years as opposed to 80 or 70 years, he misses the appointment. So I actually don't know what's going to happen now. So for me, that was kind of cool. And then to see he's like, yeah, I heard it's rude to keep your friends waiting. And I just think that catharsis of like, yeah, no, Dream kind of was looking for a friend. And, it's a little bit, I feel like with this part of the story is at least for Dream, and I think people can relate to, you have that one crazy incident in your life that just totally changes everything. So being in prison and losing 100 years of your existence, which even though in theory Dream it will last as long as humans dreams, he said time doesn't move any faster for him. So to spend 100 years and then you're like, well, how do I repair, and maybe I should make a change or two in my life.
I minus the really bad wigs. I loved that. I loved that relationship that they had between the two of them. Yeah. Paul, favorite character from this?
I know Brendan's gonna be mad, but Matthew the Raven.
Yeah,
I just enjoyed him. I thought because you don't get really a sense with his other Raven, the one that we see that gets shot.
No.
right.
What kind of relationship they really had? Obviously, a very powerful one, but he didn't want Matthew. It's the story of the dad who got the dog that didn't want to get the dog and then falls in love with the dog. For me, just the one scene where he's like, all right, you have to go back up and you have to go tell what's happening, and he's like, no, I'm staying, we're in this together. I'm here for you. And I didn't even know he was based off an actual comic book character too, which is even funnier. So
you're right. I think he's related to the not Sandman, Swamp Thing a little bit.
Matt Cable was his name in life.
Oh, really?
Died and brought back as.
Oh, I don't think I knew
Matthew.
that.
Yeah, I was just reading.
I was wondering what you were scrolling through over there.
And I scroll fast. So yeah, Matt Cable, part of he was in a couple of issues of Doom Patrol, Swamp Thing.
Okay.
Yep. So he was in the Swamp Thing show, which is even funnier.
I still have to watch the Swamp Thing.
I watched the first 2 episodes, and then it got canceled immediately, and I was like, why am I going to watch this?
I would watch it anyway, just for its own
the effects
aesthetics.
were amazing.
Yeah. So, and since we're on sort of this thing, so this is a show that cost $10 million an episode. That's a lot of money.
Yes.
Brendan's eyes are going wide.
Well, yeah, it does show at times, though. I feel like a lot. There were times where, especially that intro bit when you first see the dreaming, looks great and everything. Then there are other times you look and you're like, they are so on a green screen now.
There were a couple of rough green screens.
That's funny you should say that, because one of Ronnie's comments to me was, he said the CGI at times seemed to be shoddy, which is sad seeing as how they spent $10 million on each episode.
Okay, but a little bit though, they also built some practical sets. Like that whole cage scene in the first episode, that was practical. They built all of that. So as opposed to making that some sort of CGI thing, I think if they took time to build actual sets for some of these things, then I think that's where the money went. And sometimes you're like, we'll just CGI London a little bit, and that's what they did.
It's a very expensive show, and they've been asking Netflix hey, season two, is it going to happen? What's going on? And even Neil Gaiman himself tweeted out I don't know if this is fiscally responsible or something along those lines. He's like, this is a lot of money to spend on a show. But I have to think now about, for example, I don't know if you guys are watching the Lord of the Rings stuff on Amazon. No. I got 10 minutes into it and we're like, this is boring, and we turned it off. They spent $500 million, I think, on their show.
Something stupid.
Yeah. And so I feel like this is just a drop in the bucket financially, compared to something like that.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. I'm hoping season 2 comes about. So, all right, now my next question is favorite storyline, because there are multiple storylines that are going on, throughout this entire thing. And this might tie into your character too.
I mean, I'd probably, for me, I think it probably would go back to the
Hob,
Hob Gadling. I think that storyline I think was kind of fun for me, just because it was something unexpected. I think that was one of the better ones for me, but also too just a little bit. They initially marketed this whole thing as 10 episodes, and then they were like, boom, surprise, 11 episodes.
Those 2 episodes,
which was really cool. And I kind of, as well, it's hard at times to maybe watch the content. I think the Calliope storyline, especially with Dream kind of being almost like a good guy and hero and saving Calliope at the end was really nice, so.
I have to say, we were watching the bonus episodes, and what was the animated one?
That is about the dream of cats. So essentially, the idea that if this person's almost like a messiah character or a prophet saying that if we all dream that cats rule the world, it will go back to the time before.
Did you watch the bonus episode?
Cats rule the world.
You did or didn't?
Did not.
I don't know how much you're missing. I will say that, like, when we were watching the animated one, my wife turns to me and goes, "How much longer is this going to go on?" Because it was tough to sit through that one.
Gaiman has mentioned that they were happy to be able to do something like that.
Yes.
There are still stories like that in the comics that they want to bring in because it's part of the Sandman mythos. But you really can't make a whole episode.
And that's the thing with the Sandman, that there's all of these 75 episodes, 75 issues, but not all of them tie in. Like, some of them are just like one-off stories where somebody comes in, does something, and then goes away, and we never hear or see from them again. So, and that was kind of where these bonus episodes came in.
Well, it's funny you say that because we're talking about like what our favorite kind of storyline is in this. I thought that this was going to be an entire season of him trying to get his toys back.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it seems because again, I'm not as familiar with, I know the characters,
Right.
I know the mythos, I know that sort of stuff. I didn't know the story, which is fine because that gives me a lot of fresh perspective to come in.
Yes.
And I thought it was going to be an entire season of him,
Right.
and then
the mask, the sand,
and the ruby,
and the ruby,
and that Dr. Destiny was going to be the bad guy, like the Corinthian. Obviously, the Corinthian was like the big bad,
which is not necessarily the case in the comics. The Corinthian, they fleshed out his story, because I think you need to have someone that's a character arc for a season on television. So, but continue.
So for me, when they resolve that, it's like episode 5.
Yeah.
Like halfway through the show, they're like, and he's sleeping now. I was like, oh, okay. And I thought that was a bolder choice and a bolder strategy, and it made it feel like the season was much longer, which I like in a good way. So but for me, talking about favorite story in this particular show, I'm going to say just my favorite episode. I think that's probably the better choice. The episode in the diner.
Oh, you're stealing mine.
Ooh.
And I'll say it. The reason is, when you can do an episode of a show where the main character's not in it and it's still so good, you have something very special in that show.
Yeah.
Or you have the opposite, like in the Book of Boba Fett. The best episode of the Book of Boba Fett for me was the one episode with the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And Boba Fett's not even in it. And I was like, that's a testament to how bad the show is.
Yes.
But
so John D, played by David Thewlis, who is just an amazing actor. That guy's got range.
Ramus Lupin, I forgot about that.
I know. He is in the diner, and he has almost sort of these people all captive in there, and his idea is that a perfect world is one where everyone tells the truth.
Yeah.
And he forces everyone to tell the truth, and these
gets progressively worse.
And these are characters that were not really introduced before the episode.
Not a single one.
No, they're all self-contained in the episode, and so that's I'm echoing your sentiment here. That's probably my favorite storyline too, because I was so engrossed in everyone's individual stories and how relationships just devolved over the episode.
Every relationship, every friendship, every intimate relationship has a component of white lie. Mm-hmm. Like it's an important and vital part of our society to be able to not lying per se, but hold back the entire truth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we got to see what happens when people say exactly what's on their mind, and what's on your mind isn't necessarily your total truth. It's just the truth of the moment, right? They always say that you shouldn't speak, you shouldn't say things when you're angry. Because you say things that you're just lashing out. You're not necessarily telling the exact truth, but you're telling the truth in that moment. Yeah. So for me, that episode was it was a great perspective into the human mind, into human beings, into his mind, where he thought he was helping them. He thought he was saving them by letting them tell all the truths and go have wild sex orgies. And, he's eating ice cream, walking by all the sex.
Yeah.
So it was just such an interesting episode and a really good episode. Yeah. And that was like my favorite story.
I too, yeah. I think what I love so much about this show is the fact that your main character is this all-powerful creature, but yet he's learning as he goes along, and we're learning with him. And the diner is sort of like that learning process for us of like, oh, this is what that kind of world would look like. So it's almost like we take on the persona of being Dream, in that we're learning by watching. We're absorbing what human beings are like by watching raw human behavior within that moment. So okay, I guess at this point we've gone through our characters, we've gotten through our favorite storylines. Do we have any criticisms?
I think was definitely the CGI at times. That was one of my bigger criticisms that I had with the whole thing. I probably would have, my smaller one, I would have liked to have been the demon versus Sandman as opposed to Lucifer versus Sandman for the verbal fight for the helmet. And then while I consult my notes, you guys got any other criticisms?
I don't really, what? I don't think I have what? I feel like the only criticism I had was in those last tack-on episodes that were the bonus episodes, where some of it was a mixed bag for me, and it kind of, not that it sullied the stuff that was beforehand, but it was like made me realize how this could be a show that would not be enjoyable, because there were some stories that I'm like, wow, this just does nothing for me and doesn't contribute. So I guess I would encourage whatever thought process and effort that they put into the main 10 episodes, keep that.
Okay.
So I don't have any criticism about the show because I didn't know it well enough to, and I think that actually helped me, because we all know that when I know a source material way too well, like sometimes watching the adaptation is not easy. I mentioned my issues with any of the gender swapping of characters. It's not enough to ruin. It's not even a criticism. It's not going to ruin the show for me. I still enjoyed the show. It's more of a why.
It was a disappointment
because
you were looking forward to it.
An interesting thought that I really want to run by you guys quick. Do you think this show could have been a movie?
No.
So the reason I ask that is because one of the things that this show has gotten so much praise for is being such a faithful adaptation.
It is extraordinary. Like, I was looking up articles today about the differences between the two, and they're not that long.
Very
those
few.
articles.
But then I think of a movie like Watchmen. But I know your thoughts on Watchmen and all that.
I like it, but it just is missing the heart.
And I think, like, the show Watchmen was very critically acclaimed.
That had heart.
People loved it.
Yeah.
Had they done Watchmen, same style, I'd even argue the same director. I know your thoughts, but and done it as a 10-episode show instead, I think it would have been better.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think that I'm glad that they finally, because this was supposed to be a movie. Sandman was supposed to be a movie at one point, and
how could you?
Exactly, and that's what they said about Watchmen too. They're the unfilmable comic books.
Yeah, that's why with Watchmen, I've only watched the extended director cuts.
It's tough,
and they're long, because it incorporates the cartoon stuff with the black ship and everything.
Yeah, I hated the black ship stuff. Reading that in the comic book, I hated.
Yeah. I kind of like sped up through those sections too.
But like that, when I was watching this show, that's what came to mind. I was like, I wonder if Watchmen had instead done a 10-episode, same cast, same characters, same, maybe just 10 episodes though, and fleshed out a little bit more instead of just trying to get all the iconic shots on screen.
Right.
Because it is a faithful adaptation for the most part, with the exception of the ending where I actually think the ending's better where they frame Dr. Manhattan instead of the fake alien invasion.
I could see why.
I disagree.
That's fair.
I understand why they did it, but I disagree.
That's fair. But again, I watched the movie before I read the comic.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a different perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, I think your idea is sound there. That a 10-episode series gives a comic like this room to breathe. There's not like loving cuts in the editing room and stuff like that. You can really, and I think this is one of those few shows that really shows how you can live in that medium of a 10-episode arc. Because they pack so much in there, and it is even Gaiman has talked about how faithful it is and everything. It's a strong adaptation, and it's because they have the room.
And it's rare to get the creator to have such a seal of approval over. I mean, who is it that Frank Miller hates his stuff being adapted? There's a couple of them that will refuse.
What's his name with the long beard?
Alan Moore.
Alan Moore, thank you.
Yeah, at Watchmen.
Thanks, Brandon.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Alan Moore hates like adaptation stuff. He's way against it. Okay, so let's go around and let's hear our Star City rating for this. Brendan.
I'm just going to fanboy out here and give it 5. I'm sorry.
Wow.
I think you should watch it. I think it's absolutely amazing. It's a very faithful adaptation. So if you love the comic book, you'll definitely enjoy seeing it on the screen. If you haven't seen it before, I think it's a great introduction to the series. And I think what is said in the comic book series, if this gets you into that, knowing those stories and hearing those words or reading those words that Neil Gaiman wrote and the stories he was telling, I think you should definitely get in on this. If I know 5s aren't really handed out a lot on your guys' shows, but it's a lot more of the fanboy in me coming out with that bit. And just one thing I just wanted to add, because I know it's a little bit at the wrong part, but like the mic drop scene when he does that at the end of the competition, I just absolutely love that line. I think just people being able to hear stuff like that Neil Gaiman wrote in the Sandman world, I think it's whatever introduces them into this. I think I'm all more for it.
Paul,
I'm going to give it upon first viewing a 4.
Okay,
it is fantastic. It's really good. I think maybe the only mild criticism is it's not an action-packed show.
No.
It is not like you think superhero adaptation. You think punch, punch, smash, smash, as Timmy used to so eloquently put, more smashing.
More smashing.
This is a show. It's heavy and it's paced well, but it's a slow pace. It's a deliberate slow pace, and especially like the first episode, we if you don't get into it, you're not going to get into it. It has to catch you right away. So I'm going to give it a 4. I think it probably is going to grow and turn into a 4.5, but it is fantastic if that's your style, if that's your niche, if you like your American gods, your mythology and all that stuff, especially mythology in the modern era. I think this is the show for you.
So, all right. So it's funny you bring up Timmy, because now that makes me think of something. So Timmy asked us, because we were going to sit down and the 3 of us were going to watch this together, and he said, was this something I would be interested in? And we thought about it, and when we watched a little bit, we're like, no, I don't really think this is something you're going to be interested in, because it is not action-packed. It is deeply philosophical. It's extremely meditative. For some who are waiting for those big action scenes, it is slow. It is a very adult superhero show. And that is everything that I love about it. So I have to give it 4.5. I was enthralled. I loved every minute of it. There were some times where I found my mind wandering, but I don't know if that's necessarily a negative thing either, because I think the show encourages that sort of philosophical reflection. So I absolutely loved it.
Ronnie's thoughts?
Ronnie says, I thought the show was all right. The pacing seemed to be off. It seemed like every other episode was good. The first half of the series was much better than the second half. So I guess
we did talk about that. Yeah,
I will say, and I understand why they chose it, but like the Corinthian seemed, his whole story arc seemed a little bit cliched at times, because I think they drew it out and they wanted to make it into something that manufacture something that kind of looked like a superhero villain. But so I understand that. So yeah, I can understand that. He also says, I felt that the main character actor got outshined by every other character or actor on the screen. Which
I could see that thought.
Yeah. Which that makes sense, because I think Dream is he's the major character, but in terms of presence, he's such a minor character. Even amongst, like, I think Brendan would probably agree with this, even amongst his siblings, he's like the least of all of them.
The
The
ranking actually matters with them. So he's the third one, and in theory, he's the third most powerful one. But if you're talking about personality,
I guess in terms of charisma,
I think in terms of personality, he's 6. I think Destiny's a little drier than he is.
And then there's Desire. He's so muted.
Desire is very flamboyant.
Yeah.
You have Destruction. You have I love her title, Delirium, who was once the Light.
Right.
Even Death is chipper than Dream is.
Yeah, so I could see that. He says it was definitely better though than I thought it was going to be, and he gives it a 3 out of 5.
Okay, that's above average.
Yeah. So that
again, it lends to my statement that if you don't get into this, you're not going to get into it.
Yeah.
It's not like we've watched a lot of these Marvel shows where it's like it gets better.
Right.
This is not one of the. This show has its genre. It has its niche. If you're not into it, you're not going. It's not going to change the way you.
I
view
will
it.
say this too: that if at any given moment you're like, I'm not really into this story, give it an episode because the story's going to change.
Yeah.
That is true. Yes.
All right, so that wraps us up. Again, if you want to find us and some of our other shows, you can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and listening stations. You can find us also on the Facebook. And speaking of the Facebook, let's talk about Fan Feedback Friday. So we have not been around for 2 weeks, so we've got 2 weeks worth of Fan Feedback Friday. So Paul,
Well, we're going to do just one today.
Oh, okay.
Because we have another episode to record.
Oh, right. So I know my students are hanging on because they loved hearing their stuff. So this week's Fan Feedback Friday, which can be found on the Facebook.
Well, technically, this is last week's Fan Feedback Friday from September 16th. What is a superpower that would make your job or career easier? All right, so we have super speed, because actually getting to work on time. Being able to read minds. Teleportation, so I don't have to drive to work. It would make so much. All right, and then from Rob's comic book class of 2022, teleportation to go out anywhere I want, no airline fees. Freeze time to stop everything. Super speed to get everything done fast without worry. Time travel to fix all my mistakes. Ability to live underwater, so I'm not limited to what I can do. Hyper intelligence to make my mind easier. Mind reading so I can tell if someone is lying to me. Not needing sleep so I can have more time in my day.
All right.
Oh, wait, there's more.
Oh, of course there is.
Super taste.
Ew.
Super taste to make everything I eat taste amazing.
As long as the taste makes it amazing. I don't want I don't want black licorice to sort of be
I would love like a Matrix hack where anything I like, how like the Matrix tells you what's like, drink this water and it tastes like the finest wine instead, but it's still just water, and I'm getting all that because I hate salad and stuff like that. So flight and ultimate deduction. I thought it said destruction. I was about to...
Ultimate deduction?
So you can determine who committed the crime.
Oh, sort of like Mega Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, there you go.
I always say I'd want like super or like just flying, just because I think that's the best one. But I think with my line of work now, I think having like microscopic vision would probably make my life a little bit easier.
Yep.
I think I would like to have super listening so I can absolutely hear everything my spouse says and understand it too.
Super comprehension.
Super comprehension. So thank you very much. That takes us through our Facebook. And again, you can join us with Misfit Faction Media Network. You can also check us out on Facebook with our Cinematic Adventures, our Multiverse Fancast, and an MF Uncensored show. We have Instagram with Bibliophiles Assemble. We have Twitter. We have TikTok. We have YouTube. We also have our website. Please check out themisfitfaction.com, where you can see our podcasts, our articles, and our merchandise. And that wraps us up. Thank you very much again for Brendan, a.k.a. Blind Bat 8719, for joining us.
Me on, guys.
How
and
can
I
they find
am on
you?
YouTube. If you're looking for Blind Bat 8719 on Blind Without the Eye, BLNDBAT 8719. I make Magic the Gathering content creator. I play on the Magic Arena platform, and I film myself playing games. If you enjoy watching people just play video games on the computer for fun, or at least while you're doing background work, please come check out my channel, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff.
And speaking of Brendan, I know he texted me the other day, and I didn't get to slip it in. He sent me a link to Disney's answer to Magic. Why should we be checking this out, and what is it exactly?
So, Disney's realized you can make a lot of money in collectible card games. So, like, I have my Magic collection, for example. There are definitely cards that are over $500 in my collection, individual pieces of cardboard, and they sell like hotcakes on at Walmart and then also the secondary market. So, basically, Disney's realized that if we make our own collectible card game, that because you don't get all the cards it's not like Cards Against Humanity where you buy the box and then everything's inside of it.
Okay.
You don't get all the pieces in one shot, so they can sell packs of 15 cards, and you're trying to get that Mickey Mouse or that Aladdin character card. They can just print paper essentially and print money by just selling the stuff over and over again.
Wow, interesting. That's cool. So I definitely I recognize the genius that and the expertise that Blind Bat brings to the table. So we thank him a lot for joining us. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. As always, I am Rob.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Brendan.
And we'll be back in a flash.
See ya.
Bye.
Mortgage Park.